Misty, I'll start off with you. What were like some negative things that about the process that maybe you weren't prepared for that other folks that are selling can be prepared for?
So for me, I knew that you would want financials and that type of thing. I was prepared for that. I just wasn't prepared for the volume of paperwork that was needed. And at the time, it's needed quickly because you're in the middle of a contract. And so I could have been more prepared as far as having 3 and 4 years worth of statements, bank statements, all of that kind of stuff ready to go. And I was more prepared for about a year. So that was one of the things that if, I could advise someone is just to have all that prepared and ready to go and go back 3 years and have it handy in case it's asked for. And I want to say, Matthew, too, that when I met you in 2018, that was the first question that I asked you is what could I do better to make my business saleable? Because in 2018, I wasn't ready. But I knew at some point I wanted to be. And so I just wanted to share that you gave me the advice of making it not about me.
Wait, I gave you the
business.
advice that made me pay more money for that? That doesn't sound like a very smart thing to do.
I thought it worked out well. So
Good one. Well played. Steve, what would you say is like a surprising negative thing that happened during the sale?
I don't know that I would say there was anything surprising, but I do agree with what Misty's saying is, the amount of information that you need to have available and have available quickly and have it organized is an absolute must. And in our case, it was also a relatively short contract to close period. So I think that probably added another layer of anxiety, if you will, to the transaction. And it was really all about the communication piece with Josh and his team, and making sure that we were clear on what was needed and getting it over promptly.
Well, if y'all had sold to me back in 2018 when I first approached both of you, it would have been way easier. We didn't ask for any information. We just trusted you.
We had about 10 questions we asked. That was about it.
Yeah, I have to say this though. Matthew is persistent. That is true. I just got tired of it.
He just gave in.
But I think that's a lesson for all of you out there who are looking to buy. Like, this is a long-term relationship, and the way we kind of look at it is, and I know Matthew, like giving Misty advice, or he and Steve becoming friends, regardless if anything ever happened. Like, we just feel like, hey, we want to help people succeed and see people succeed, and then those relationships just flourish, and people know that we're looking to buy all the time, I think. So
it's a relationship kind of business. And so because Matthew did reach out and kept in touch, then it was a no-brainer when I decided to make the decision that would be a company that I would reach out to. So if I had never seen Matthew again, who knows in 2022 if I had even thought to reach out to him. So it is definitely relationship built.
And that's such an important thing to consider if you're looking at buying a business. It's a property management business. It's the long game. You've got to take the approach of it being the long game, and it's all about the relationship. So to the extent that you'll commit to fostering those relationships, you'll have success. Maybe not right away, but over time you'll be successful.
Steve, what did you look for in a buyer? Like as you were processing this sale, like what were things that were important to you?
I think if I take this back to the beginning, so Rent-It Network was 10 years old at the time that it was acquired by Evernest, and from day one it was built to be either sold or to function independently of me. And so we had the luxury of building something from day one that would support that. The first 5 years or so, I was relatively absent. And then the last 5 years, I was a little more present as we were putting more systems, process, people, and so on in place. And when I started to have conversations about, all right, I know I want to, sell this at some point. It was about the company, who are they? Is there, I thought about my team, quite frankly, and what does that look like? And how does it impact them? How does it impact our clients? As you grow, it's hard to remember everybody, but every one of us have those clients that we've had for many, many years, and you want to know they're going to be taken care of. We focused very much on the reputation side of things in our market area, and worked very, very hard for our Google ratings. So, making sure we were aligning with a company that had a similar appreciation for that was so important. So don't get me wrong, the financial aspect of selling your company is, super important. But at the same time, you do have to look at what I consider to be from the seller's perspective, things that are a little bit more qualitative. So those were the things that were important to me.
Yeah, we always say like the 3 questions that sellers always ask are, first one is how much do you pay? The second one is what are you going to do with my team? And then the third one is what does the process look like? And so, a lot of when we have an introductory call with a seller, that's the first things that they want to know. And so Josh has a number of he probably has his answer to those 3 questions down pretty pat. But and Misty, I would ask you the same thing. I mean, as you were kind of like thinking through this process and talking, I know you talked to a number of companies. What were you looking for in a seller? And keep in mind, everybody, we're not saying this so they can we can brag about us, but again, you're trying to get into the mind of the seller if you're a buyer, but also trying to get into, if you are a seller, kind of making sure that you're prepared for something like this. And so that's the whole idea of this. So Misty, sorry, I jumped in, but talk about your thought process around selling.
So because I am on the board of National, I certainly knew a lot of the players that were moving in the market, which worked in my advantage, I believe, because I picked the top 3 and sent those over to the companies that I was interested in. And then I scheduled appointments to do one-on-ones with them because I wanted to compare culture and I wanted to compare how they handled their transitions. And there was just a lot of fact finding on my end. And Steve is right. You can't take the financial part of the picture out of the equation. But after that's been addressed, it's how is it going to relate to my owners and to my staff? And in the end, the decision became Evernest after all of those interviews. And so that's how I chose.
Awesome. Thank you for that. So I would like talk about a little bit about the process. Steve, Missy, why don't you start? How long did your process take from essentially deciding to sell, choosing a buyer, and then to close? Talk about that process, what that looked like for folks.
So I made the decision in October of 2022, and I was pretty prepared at that point. And from that point to the date of closing with the company I chose, which is Evernest, was 60 days.
Yep. That's great.
That's pretty quick.
Yeah.
And
Well, and actually it was really 45 if you think about it, because the commitment wasn't made until October 15th, and then boom from there. So that time, and I'm sure Steve will agree, it goes by extremely quickly and extremely stressful.
Yeah, because those financials, you got to have those financials.
Steve, you were an even shorter timeline, right?
Yeah, it was a really, really fast timeline. We closed on essentially November 30th, I guess, and we had finalized the initial LOI probably late October. So it was a pretty short timeline. I remember thinking at the time, it's like, let's just get this done. What do we need, a week or 2? And then I'm like, then it was just like, to Misty's point, it time flies. It went by quickly, and it's like, let's get it done.
I think for me, it was probably the biggest emotional roller coaster that I've had in a very long time in my life. So up and down. So,
but it all worked out. Yeah, look, when we first started, obviously we wouldn't been able to close on Steve or Misty's business in 30 or 45 days like we were, but we had done it enough times. We kind of we have this pretty exhaustive checklist that we go through. And that's what I would suggest if you're a buyer, is make sure that you've kind of created your checklist of all the things that you need to do, not only pre-transaction from LOI and contract, and then closing, but even post, right? Like, what is your integration plan to make sure that you're bringing these homes into your process? So, really important to get that taken care of.